He failed the first time quietly, the way most people do, with no audience and no applause, only a heavy silence that settled into his chest like dust. He told himself it was normal, that everyone fails once, maybe twice, and that tomorrow would feel different. But tomorrow came carrying the same weight, and then the next day and the next. Each failure stacked itself on his shoulders until standing upright felt like an act of rebellion. He watched others move forward while he stayed stuck, replaying his mistakes like a broken recording that refused to end. At night, he stared at the ceiling, wondering how effort could feel so honest and still end in defeat. He worked harder than before, sacrificed sleep, ignored hunger, silenced his doubts with forced optimism, yet when the moment came again, he failed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to hurt deeply. People stopped asking how things were going. Their silence said more than their words ever could. Some offered advice that sounded suspiciously like blame. Others offered petty disguised as encouragement. He nodded, smiled, thanked them, and carried their opinions home like extra baggage he never asked for. Failure became familiar, almost routine, and that familiarity scared him more than the pain itself. He began to wonder if this was his role in the world, to try and fall, to hope and lose, to dream and wake up empty-handed. Every new attempt felt heavier than the last, because now it wasn't just about the goal, it was about proving he wasn't a mistake. He failed again, and this time it broke something inside him. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly, the way rust eats through metal. Confidence thinned. Motivation weakened. The voice in his head grew sharper and crueler, reminding him of every past loss, every missed chance, every promise he couldn't keep to others and to himself. He started avoiding mirrors because he didn't like the person staring back. That person looked tired, uncertain, and dangerous, close to giving up. He told himself he was just being realistic, but deep down he knew it was fear wearing a reasonable mask. Time passed, and with it went opportunities he didn't chase anymore. He learned how to quit early, how to lower expectations so disappointment wouldn't hurt as much. From the outside, it looked like maturity. On the inside, it felt like surrender. He still dreamed, but quietly now, carefully, like dreams were fragile things that might shatter if spoken aloud. He convinced himself that some people were meant to succeed and others were meant to watch, and that maybe acceptance was the real victory. But every time he tried to accept it, something inside him resisted, a small, stubborn spark that refused to die. Another failure arrived, and this one came with witnesses. People saw it, they talked, they judged. He felt exposed, like his weaknesses had been dragged into the light for everyone to inspect. Shame wrapped around him tightly, making it hard to breathe. That night, he sat alone, replaying every step that led him there, every decision that felt right at the time and wrong in hindsight. He asked himself the question he had avoided for years: what if the problem wasn't the world, the timing, or the circumstances? What if it were him? The thought terrified him, not because it hurt, but because it might be true. For days, he did nothing. No plans, no effort, no pretending. He let himself feel the weight he had been running from. He felt anger, disappointment, jealousy, regret, and a deep exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. In that stillness, something strange happened. The noise in his head softened. Without constantly chasing the next attempt or defending himself from imagined judgment, he finally heard his own thoughts clearly. He realized he had been fighting failure like an enemy, when in reality it had been trying to teach him something he refused to learn. He noticed a pattern that had been there all along. Every time he failed, he rushed to try again without changing anything meaningful. He changed strategies, locations, even people around him, but never changed the way he thought about himself. Deep down, he had been trying to prove his worth through success instead of building it independently. Every failure felt personal because he made it personal. He didn't see challenges as lessons. He saw them as verdicts. And verdicts don't inspire growth, they inspire fear. That realization hurt more than any failure before it. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. He saw how often he'd abandoned himself the moment things got hard. How quickly he looked for validation outside instead of strength within. He saw how fear of failing again had quietly shaped his decisions, convincing him to play small, while telling himself it was safer that way. But for the first time, he didn't blame himself in anger. He simply acknowledged the truth and sat with it. Then came the decision. It didn't arrive with dramatic music or sudden confidence. It came quietly, almost unimpressively, like a thought he could have ignored if he wanted to. He decided that failure would no longer be a stop sign. He decided it would be a signal, not a signal to quit, but a signal to pause, reflect, and adjust. He decided to stop asking, "Why does this keep happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" It was a small shift in wording, but it felt like a door opening in a room he thought was sealed shut. He also decided something harder. He decided to detach his self-worth from outcomes. Success would be welcome, failure would be accepted, but neither would define him. That decision scared him because it removed excuses. If failure no longer destroyed him, then quitting would have no justification. Growth would be unavoidable. Responsibility would be unavoidable. And so would real effort. The kind that demands patience and humility instead of quick validation. The next time he tried, it felt different. Not easier, but clearer. He approached the challenge with curiosity instead of desperation. When things didn't go as planned, he didn't spiral. He took notes. He asked better questions. He listened more than he spoke. He allowed himself to be a beginner again, even when pride whispered that he should already be better by now. He failed again, but this time failure didn't knock him down. It nudged him sideways, pointing towards something he hadn't considered before. People didn't notice the change at first. There was no sudden breakthrough, no visible win to announce. But inside, something fundamental has shifted. He was no longer running from failure. He was walking alongside it. Each setback refined him instead of hollowing him out. Each mistake sharpened his awareness instead of dulling his hope. He learned to measure progress differently, not by applause or results, but by how he responded when things went wrong. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the pieces began to align. Opportunities appeared that he might have missed before because they didn't look impressive enough. Skills improved because he practiced with intention instead of panic. Confidence grew, not the loud, fragile kind, but the quiet kind rooted in self-trust. He still failed, but those failures felt lighter, shorter, less personal. They were no longer proof of inadequacy, they were proof of effort. One day, without realizing it, he succeeded at something that once felt impossible. There was no dramatic celebration, no overwhelming rush. Just a calm acknowledgement that this moment existed, because of all the moments that didn't. He understood then that the decision he made wasn't about winning, it was about refusing to let failure decide who he was allowed to become. That single decision had quietly changed everything. And standing there, looking back at the long trail of attempts, mistakes, and near quits, he finally understood the truth he had been chasing all along. He didn't fail again and again because he was weak. He failed because he was learning how not to, and it was only when he chose to stop fighting failure and start learning from it that his life finally began to move forward.